Ooh. Ugh.
No, oh, no, don't. Stop cleansing my aura.
Hi, my name is Aaron, and this is Old TV Cinema. Look, I've seen every episode of Friends, probably twice. Okay, maybe 4 times. Don't judge me. The point is, I thought I knew everything there was to know about Ross, Rachel, Monica, Chandler, Joey, and Phoebe. And then I started digging. And what I found was a goldmine of behind-the-scenes chaos, near misses, and bizarre decisions that almost turned one of the greatest sitcoms in television history into something completely unrecognizable. Buckle up, because this is 15 weird facts about Friends that you almost certainly didn't know. Fact 15. Nick Offerman almost played Chandler. Before we get into this one, just take a moment. Close your eyes. Imagine Nick Offerman, the man who would later give us the deadpan, meat-smoking, government-hating Ron Swanson on Parks and Recreation, delivering Chandler Bing's trademark sarcasm. Could that be any more confusing? Well, it almost happened. During the casting process for Friends in 1993, the producers held auditions that brought in a staggering number of actors for the 6 lead roles. And the role of Chandler Bing, the wisecracking, commitment-phobic data analyst, with the world's most questionable fashion choices, was one of the most hotly contested. Multiple actors read for the part before Matthew Perry walked in and essentially became Chandler on the spot. But Nick Offerman was among those who auditioned, along with Jon Favreau, who you probably know better as the guy who built the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and Craig Bierko, who actually came very close to landing the part and has talked about it in interviews since. The thing is, Matthew Perry wasn't even the producer's first instinct. They had to be convinced. But once he read the lines, the decision was pretty much made. The dry delivery, the self-deprecating timing, the way he could make a joke land and feel sad at the same time. That was all Perry. And honestly, imagining anyone else in that role is the kind of alternate universe that keeps TV historians up at night. Nick Offerman, for his part, went on to do just fine. But somewhere in a parallel timeline, Ron Swanson is asking if that was sarcasm in a New York apartment. And honestly, I'd watch that show too. Fact 14. The show almost had a completely different title. Friends, simple, clean, 6 letters. It tells you everything and nothing at the same time. But here's the thing, it almost wasn't called Friends at all. During development, the show went through a parade of working titles that ranged from perfectly reasonable to genuinely baffling. The earliest version of the concept was called Insomnia Cafe, which honestly sounds more like a late-night talk show for anxious people than a sitcom about 6 pals in Manhattan. From there, it evolved into Friends Like Us, which at least had the word friends in it, so the network was getting warmer. There was also a version floating around called 6 of 1, which sounds like a math problem I'd have failed in 8th grade. And then briefly it was just called Across the Hall, leaning into the whole neighbors and apartments angle. NBC executives pushed for something punchy and marketable, something that could fit on a coffee mug. And eventually someone in a conference room said, "Just friends," and the room apparently went quiet in that way rooms do when the right answer lands. Creator Marta Kaufman has talked about how the title needed to capture the idea that at a certain point in your 20s, your friends become your family. 6 of 1 wasn't doing that. Insomnia Cafe definitely wasn't doing that. Friends did exactly that in one word, and 30 years later, that simplicity still holds up. Fact 13. The fountain in the Wasn't in New York. You know the opening credits, the one with the fountain. The one you're humming right now, whether you want to or not. Go ahead, try to stop it. I'll wait. The 6 of them dancing around in the water, while the Rembrandts tell you they'll be there for you. It is one of the most iconic title sequences in television history. The kind of opening that stops you from skipping even after your 100th rewatch. And here's the kicker that is going to quietly ruin it for you. That fountain is nowhere near New York City. Not even close. The fountain used in the Friends opening credits is located at the Warner Brothers Ranch facility in Burbank, California, which, geographically speaking, is about 2,700 miles away from Greenwich Village. 2,700 miles. I checked. The whole sequence was filmed early in the morning before sunrise to avoid the California heat, and to keep the lot clear of curious onlookers who would have absolutely lost their minds, seeing 6 of the most famous faces on television, splashing around in a fountain at 5 in the morning. The cast reportedly had a genuinely great time filming it, which probably explains why they all look authentically happy rather than professionally cheerful. There is a difference, and cameras always catch it. Now, to be fair, the show did film exteriors in New York on occasion. The establishing shots of the apartment building on Bedford Street are real New York locations. The city is genuinely in the show's DNA in countless ways. But that fountain, that specific body of water that your brain has permanently and irrevocably associated with Manhattan friendship, oversized coffee cups, and the absolute peak of 1990s television is a Warner Brothers backlot sitting in the San Fernando Valley, surrounded by palm trees and studio golf carts. I find this both mildly upsetting and completely hilarious in equal measure. New York City spent decades claiming ownership of a show whose most iconic image was filmed 3 time zones away on a California studio lot. The whole thing is peak Hollywood. Build the myth first, figure out the geography later. And honestly, it worked perfectly. Because 30 years on, that fountain still means New York to every single person who watched this show. That is either brilliant filmmaking or the greatest geographical con ever pulled on a television audience. Possibly both. Fact 12. Jennifer Aniston almost quit before the pilot. Here is a sentence that should make every Friends fan break into a cold sweat. Jennifer Aniston almost didn't play Rachel Green. Not because she wasn't cast, she was, but because she had another job and she wasn't sure she could do both. Before Friends came along, Aniston was a cast member on a CBS sitcom called Muddling Through. It wasn't setting the world on fire, but it was a steady gig and she had a contract. When the Friends opportunity came around, her team had to work through a genuinely complicated situation. If Muddling Through got picked up for a full season, Aniston would have been contractually obligated to stay, which would have meant walking away from Friends entirely. The show sat on the bubble for a nerve-wracking few weeks while network decisions were made. CBS ultimately passed on Muddling Through, which freed Aniston up to go play a spoiled rich girl turned independent woman in a Manhattan apartment. And the rest, as they say, is Emmy-winning history. But think about what was at stake there. No Jennifer Aniston means no Rachel. No Rachel means the entire romantic spine of the show changes completely. The Ross and Rachel will, they won't they, that kept audiences tuning in for 10 seasons, the haircut that launched 1,000 salon requests, the character arc from daddy's girl to successful fashion executive. All of it almost didn't happen because of a CBS sitcom that most people couldn't name today if you paid them. Television history is terrifyingly fragile sometimes. Fact 11. The cast negotiated salary together. By the time Friends hit its stride in the mid-1990s, it wasn't just a hit show. It was a cultural phenomenon. And with that kind of success came the inevitable money conversation. What happened next was, by Hollywood standards, genuinely remarkable. When contract renegotiations came around, the 6 cast members, Jennifer Aniston, Courteney Cox, Lisa Kudrow, Matt LeBlanc, Matthew Perry, and David Schwimmer, made a decision that was essentially unheard of in the television industry. They negotiated as a block, all 6 of them together, with unified representation, refusing to let the network play them against each other. No one was going to be offered more to create division. No one was going to be quietly elevated above the others. The strategy worked spectacularly. By seasons 9 and 10, each cast member was earning $1 million per episode. For a 22-episode season. I'll let that math sink in for a second. The move set a precedent that changed how ensemble casts approach contract negotiations and is still talked about in entertainment industry circles today. David Schwimmer has spoken about how the idea came from a genuine sense of fairness. Nobody wanted to be the highest paid. Nobody wanted to be the lowest paid. They wanted to be equal. And in a town built on hierarchy, ego, and one-upsmanship, 6 people in their 20s just decided to do the right thing. That doesn't happen very often. It barely happens at all. Fact 10. Marcel the monkey was a nightmare to work with. If you watched the first season of Friends, you remember Marcel, Ross's pet capuchin monkey who became an unexpected supporting character for a stretch of episodes before being written off when he was donated to a zoo. The official story was that the producers felt Marcel had run his course creatively. The unofficial story is considerably more entertaining. Working with Marcel, whose real name was Katie, was reportedly a logistical nightmare from start to finish. Trained animal performances require an enormous amount of time and patience. And on a production schedule as tight as Friends, that created friction almost immediately. The cast was not exactly thrilled. Jennifer Aniston has been fairly candid about the fact that working with a live monkey was, let's say, less than glamorous. There were issues with the animal not hitting marks, not performing on cue, and occasionally doing things that are not appropriate to describe in detail on a family-oriented sitcom set. The trainers were professional, the monkey was not. And by the time the writers decided to send Marcel off to the San Diego Zoo, there were reportedly very few tears shed on set. David Schwimmer, to his credit, handled the whole situation with characteristic Ross energy, which is to say he was deeply invested in the animal and slightly baffled why no one else shared his enthusiasm. Marcel remains one of the more fondly remembered odd choices of season 1, but behind the scenes, he was basically the seven of friends, present, chaotic, and eventually erased. We covered that in a previous video if you want to go back and check it out. Fact 9. The apartment number changed between the pilot and season 1. This one is for the truly obsessive viewers, and I know you're out there because I am you. If you go back and watch the Friends pilot, which aired in September of 1994, you'll notice something that will quietly ruin your rewatch experience forever. Monica's apartment number is different. In the pilot episode, Monica and Rachel's apartment is numbered 5. Joey and Chandler's apartment across the hall is numbered 4. Simple enough. But from the very first regular season episode onward, Monica's apartment became 20, and Joey's became 19. The numbers jumped dramatically, and without any explanation whatsoever. The building apparently grew several floors between the pilot and the first official episode, which is impressive real estate development for a New York apartment building. The official reason, such as it is, came down to a practical observation. Someone on the production team pointed out that the original numbers were inconsistent with the height of the apartments as shown in exterior shots. The building appeared to be a multi-story structure, and having apartments numbered 4 and 5 would suggest they were on the ground floor, which contradicted the visual storytelling. So the numbers were quietly changed. No announcement, no explanation. The residents of that fictional Greenwich Village building just woke up one day with completely different apartment numbers, and nobody batted an eye, which, honestly, sounds about right for New York City. Fact 8. Gunther never had a real storyline until season 4. James Michael Tyler played Gunther, the perpetually lovesick Central Perk barista, for all 10 seasons of Friends. He appeared in more episodes than almost any other recurring character. He was a constant presence in the background of the coffee shop, silently devoted to Rachel, occasionally delivering a killer one-liner, and generally being the most relatable person on the entire show. And for the first 3 seasons, he was essentially wallpaper with good hair. Tyler was originally hired as an extra, a background performer. He happened to be the only extra on set who actually knew how to operate an espresso machine, which led to him being positioned behind the counter consistently. The producers noticed him, the camera noticed him, and gradually he started getting small featured moments. A line here, a reaction shot there. By season 3, he had a name. By season 4, he finally had something resembling a storyline, when his unrequited love for Rachel started being acknowledged and played for both laughs and genuine pathos. Tyler has spoken warmly about the experience in interviews over the years, and his journey from background extra to beloved recurring character is one of the more genuinely heartwarming stories the show produced off camera. He passed away in 2021 after battling prostate cancer, and the outpouring of affection from Friends fans around the world was a testament to how much Gunther meant to people. Not bad for a guy who got the job because he knew how to work a coffee machine. Fact 7. Courteney Cox was originally offered the role of Rachel. Before Courteney Cox became Monica Geller, the obsessively competitive, fiercely loyal, precision cleaning chef of the group, she was offered the chance to play a completely different character. The producers initially wanted her for Rachel, and Cox said no. Well, not exactly no. She said she wanted to play Monica instead. Cox read both parts and made a deliberate choice. She felt a stronger connection to Monica's drive, her intensity, her complicated relationship with her family, and her own perfectionism. Rachel, she felt, was a role that someone else could bring to life more naturally, whether that was a creative instinct or just good fortune. It turned out to be exactly the right call. Jennifer Aniston stepped in as Rachel, and the dynamic between the two characters, the best friends with completely opposite energies, became one of the show's most durable emotional anchors. What's fascinating about this is that it almost certainly would have been a completely different show with Cox playing Rachel. Monica's energy in the hands of a different actress, Rachel's warmth in the hands of Cox, the whole chemistry of the ensemble hinges on people being in the right roles. It's like a band where everyone has to be playing the right instrument. Move one person and the whole sound changes. Cox knew instinctively which instrument was hers, and 20-some years of television history suggests she was absolutely right. Fact 6. The show had a secret 7th cast member. Okay, I'm gonna need you to stay with me on this one, because it sounds like the setup to a conspiracy theory, but it absolutely isn't. Friends had a 7th cast member. You just never knew their name. Throughout the run of the series, a woman named Aisha Tyler appeared in several episodes as Ross's girlfriend Charlie Wheeler starting in season 9. But that's not who I'm talking about. I'm talking about the apartment itself. The iconic orange and purple decorated apartment that Monica and Rachel shared was, according to set designers and producers, treated almost like a character in its own right. Every piece of furniture, every prop, every color choice was deliberate and designed to reflect the personalities of the people living there. But more specifically, I'm talking about the role that the physical space of Central Perk played in the storytelling. The writers reportedly had an informal rule that Central Perk functioned as the show's emotional clearinghouse. Whatever needed to be processed, whatever feelings needed to be aired, whatever exposition needed to be delivered, it happened on that orange couch. The couch was never not available because the writers needed it never to be unavailable. Which brings us neatly to fact 3, but we'll get there. The point is, Central Perk wasn't just a setting. It was a storytelling mechanism, and treating a coffee shop like a cast member is either genius or completely insane. Probably both. Fact 5, NBC almost canceled Friends after the first season. This one is the kind of television history fact that makes you want to sit down quietly and think about how different the world might have been. Because in 1995, NBC was not entirely convinced that Friends deserved a second season. The first season of Friends performed well enough in the ratings, but it wasn't the runaway smash that the network had hoped for. There was internal discussion about whether the show had the legs to sustain itself, whether the ensemble format was working, and whether audiences were genuinely invested enough in these 6 characters to keep coming back. The show had its passionate defenders at the network, but it also had its skeptics. What saved Friends was a combination of factors: strong critical reception, genuine word of mouth from viewers, and a time slot that helped rather than hurt it. The show aired after Mad About You and before Seinfeld on Thursday nights, which was, let's be honest, like being handed a golden ticket. The audience flow from those 2 established hits gave Friends a foundation to build on. By the middle of the second season, the show wasn't just surviving. It was dominating. But there was a window, a genuine window, where a few network executives could have pulled the plug on one of the most successful sitcoms ever made. And if they had, well, I'd have a lot less to talk about on this channel. Fact 4. The cast had a strict no guest star upstaging rule. Friends attracted some of the biggest guest stars in television history: Julia Roberts, Brad Pitt, Reese Witherspoon, Bruce Willis, Winona Ryder. The list reads like a Hollywood Hall of Fame roll call. And for a show with that kind of star power cycling through, the fact that no single guest appearance ever overwhelmed the core 6 is not an accident. The producers operated with an unspoken but firmly enforced principle: guest stars enhanced episodes. They did not take them over. Scripts were written specifically to ensure that no matter how big the name attached to a guest role, the story always returned its center of gravity to the main cast. Guest characters existed to illuminate something about Ross or Rachel or Monica or Chandler or Joey or Phoebe. They were lenses, not spotlights. Bruce Willis, who appeared in a recurring arc in season 6 as the father of Ross's much younger girlfriend Elizabeth, reportedly waived his fee entirely after losing a bet to co-star Matthew Perry while filming The Whole 9 Yards. Willis has confirmed this story. He appeared on Friends for free because of a movie set wager, which is both the most Hollywood sentence I have ever typed and also a genuinely great story. The no upstaging rule held firm throughout the entire run. And the fact that you remember every guest star as part of a Friends episode rather than as the reason you watched it is proof that the strategy worked perfectly. Fact 3. The coffee shop couch was always available because of a reserved sign. And here we are, the couch. The orange couch at Central Perk that 6 people somehow always managed to occupy the moment they walked through the door, regardless of how crowded the coffee shop appeared to be. You watched this happen for 10 seasons and either accepted it without question or spent an unreasonable amount of time wondering how it worked. I was in the second group. Turns out the answer was already in the show the whole time. If you watch carefully in certain episodes, particularly in the earlier seasons, you can spot a small reserved sign sitting on the coffee table in front of the couch. The implication, which was apparently confirmed by the writing staff in various interviews over the years, is that the group had a standing reservation on that seating area. Central Perk was essentially their living room away from their living room, and the management accommodated this the way any neighborhood coffee shop owner might accommodate their most loyal regulars. Now, does this hold up logistically? Is a coffee shop in Manhattan going to permanently reserve prime seating for 6 people who nurse single cups of coffee for hours? Absolutely not, but as a piece of internal show logic, it's surprisingly satisfying. It acknowledges the implausibility while giving you just enough of a wink to let you relax and enjoy the fiction. And honestly, after 10 seasons, that couch deserved its own reserved sign. It did more dramatic heavy lifting than most actual cast members on lesser shows. Fact 2. The show's theme song was not the original choice. I'll Be There For You by the Rembrandts is so thoroughly embedded in the DNA of Friends that it's almost impossible to imagine the show existing without it. The clapping, the fountain, the opening notes. It's a Pavlovian response at this point. Hear the first 3 seconds and your brain immediately goes to New York apartments and oversized coffee cups. But that song almost didn't happen. The original plan was to use a different piece of music entirely for the opening credits sequence. The show's creators, Marta Kaufman and David Crane, along with composer Michael Skloff, had been developing a different sonic identity for the series before the decision was made to pursue something more pop-friendly and marketable. The Rembrandts were approached and initially wrote a short instrumental version of the theme. The full song with lyrics came later when the network pushed for something that could work as a standalone radio single, not just a TV opener. The gamble paid off spectacularly. I'll Be There For You became a genuine top 40 hit in 1994, reaching number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 airplay chart and introducing the show to an audience that might not have found it through television alone. The song and the show became mutually reinforcing marketing machines. But it started as a compromise between what the creators originally envisioned and what the network wanted, which is, when you think about it, how most great television gets made. Somebody argues with somebody else, and occasionally the argument produces something wonderful. Fact 1. The finale almost had a completely different ending. We have reached number 1, and I want to be upfront with you. This one genuinely surprised me, because the ending of Friends, the finale that aired in May of 2004 and drew over 52 million viewers in the United States alone, the one where Rachel gets off the plane and Ross meets her at the apartment, and 10 years of will they won't they finally resolves in a darkened hallway with 2 people and a set of keys, that ending almost didn't happen. During the writing of the 10th season finale, titled The Last One, the producers and writers considered multiple alternative endings. One version reportedly had Rachel not getting off the plane at all, leaving the Ross and Rachel relationship permanently unresolved and allowing the characters to move forward separately. The argument for this ending was that it was more honest, more true to the complexity of real relationships. 2 people who loved each other, but kept missing the timing. Sometimes that's just how it ends. Another version apparently played with the idea of Monica and Chandler's move to the suburbs being the emotional center of the finale, with the Ross and Rachel reunion being more ambiguous and understated, rather than the definitive moment it became. The producers ultimately decided that after 10 years, audiences had earned a clear, satisfying resolution. Not a bittersweet maybe, a genuine yes. And they were right. The finale delivered exactly what a decade of storytelling had been building toward. But knowing that it almost ended differently, that Rachel might have stayed on that plane, makes the ending that actually aired feel even more earned. Television history is full of moments that almost didn't happen. The Friends finale is one of the best reminders that sometimes the right people make the right call at the right time. And 52 million people showed up to say thank you. And that is 15 weird facts about Friends that you probably didn't know. If any of these surprised you, or if you think I missed something obvious, drop it in the comments because I genuinely want to know. This show has more layers than people give it credit for, and I'll probably be back to dig into more of it before long. If you enjoyed this trip behind the scenes of one of the greatest sitcoms ever made, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe to Old TV Cinema so you don't miss what's coming next. I'm Aaron, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.